Welcome back, everybody, to Energy the Untamed Heart podcast. And I'm so excited today to have our guest, Melanie Underwood, who has been in the culinary environment for well over 27 years and now combines her culinary skills as well as her mindfulness training to be a culinary mindfulness teacher. She helps her students find curiosity, creativity, calm, confidence, and connection. Hey guys, you're listening to the Energy of the Untamed Heart podcast, where we talk about uncaging your divinely gifted wild heart to be as free and expansive as you were born to be. My goal is to use our stories, guest interviews, and your questions to tease out what has been keeping your wild heart under wraps. I'm your host, Mielle Fox, and together we will shatter the myths of our old stories to set our wild heart free. So thanks for choosing you and showing up today. That's a lot of C's, and we're not talking diamonds through food. So I love this. I was so excited when you agreed to come on the podcast, Melanie, because my personal take is we all speak a different energetic language and we all speak a different love language that's very unique to each of us in how it comes through for us and how we align or resonate with that particular dialect, shall I say, to bring a sense of grounding and peace to our world. I'm just so excited because I've had the opportunity to have conversation with everyone from traditional modality healers, spiritual healers, artists, authors, musicians. You're my first chef, so I'm very excited because I love food and I love talking about food and I love the chemistry of food and I love the chemistry of energy. So this is like a match made in heaven to do this episode with you. So I just want to thank you for coming on. So welcome.
Thank Thank you. I'm super excited to be here and talk about all the things that I love.
I know that you provide a lot of charitable services, a lot of teaching services in your area of the world where you live to bring the excitement of the culinary world without it being so stressful. Like what I can only imagine is if you are a chef in a particular venue, traditional venue being whatever type of a restaurant or that kind of a service business, the stress must be off the charts. And I think what I see you doing now, I think to myself, oh, she's just sharing the love. She's just sharing the love language with other people to show them what's possible. Do you wanna talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what I try to do because as someone who grew up on a farm, I saw how food really is a connector. And I'm very fortunate because my parents were both really open-minded and all different people from all walks of life came into our world, but there was always this common denominator of food because it doesn't matter what you're eating, someone else is eating something similar in a different culture. Whether it's a hand pie, an empanada, a dumpling, those are all the same, just from different cultures. So it teaches a lot of openness. And then I started out in college as a journalism pre-law major, and I hated it. And I was skipping class pretty much 24/7. And I would just go when I had a test. And my mother was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "I don't really love this." And she said, "Well, you know what? You better love what you do because you may do it for a lifetime." And I said, "The only thing I love is baking and cooking." And she said, "Well, then you better be doing that." And so I started working in hotels and restaurants. And there is, as you said, a ton of chaos and pandemonium and stress. And as someone who naturally had anxiety, it was great in so many ways, but then it fed into it in other ways. And I started meditating to sort of calm my own internal systems down, but people weren't really into that in the professional world. And then I fell into teaching by accident. I had an appendectomy and a school here in New York City. I said, "Can I just work in the office for 2 months?" And then the owner said, "Hey, have you ever thought of teaching?" And I said, "No, that sounds absolutely horrible. I'm pretty opinionated. I can't imagine actually teaching people." And he said, "Why don't you sit in and see what happens?" And you know what? It was amazing. And obviously, 28 years later, I'm still teaching. And I realized that I'm a real bridge for people and that I help, heal people. I help people with the tools to heal themselves through food because we eat every day. And so for me, it's just a natural modality that you can use to help yourself on so many levels, whether it's emotional, spiritual, physical. Food can heal us. I'm all about alliteration, as you saw with the C's, but one of my taglines is when you cook, you connect. When you connect, you heal. Because there's a lot of truth in community and healing. And that's where I come into play and try to bring people together.
I love it. I love it because what you serve up listen to me, what you serve up and offer to your clients and the consumer is exactly what all of us are seeking in the world. We want connection. I realize we think we don't want connection and we try to do it all alone. We all think we're islands and, I'm so strong and I can do this and I can do that and I don't need any help. And, it's so not okay to ask. And so to learn and understand that not only is it okay to ask, but we're designed to be in community. We're designed to be in connection. So to use something that you love, like food, and I gotta say, my my love affair with food started out one way and has evolved to something different. So here I go off the rails. I'm going to give you the quick story because it actually will come back around to the whole community and connection piece. So as a child, food was basically like the answer for everything. I was raised that no matter what the problem was, food was the answer. If you were sick, you fed it. If you weren't sick, you fed it. If you were unhappy, you fed it. If you were happy, you fed it. Like food was the thing, but not from a loving cultural community social gathering of let's be a family celebratory. It was more from like an emotional band-aid direction. And as a result, well, I still have a few issues, but basically I became an extreme emotional eater. I was given the programming and the lessons of no matter what the problem is, just feed it. And it wasn't always good food. So there was a very large window of time in my life that I leaned on food as a crutch as opposed to a vehicle through which I could self-express and a vehicle through which I could nurture and love myself and a vehicle through which I could build connection with others. I also did have the opportunity growing up of seeing lots of different cultures, which was really a good thing, but also because the food game for me as a kid wasn't about curiosity and fun and experience. It was basically like clean plate club. Here you go. Here's the food. You got to eat it, whether you like it or don't like it. So early on, a lot of lessons that didn't really fit very well. And so when I see what you're doing currently, I'm like, wow, that is monumental in addressing a lot of unspoken, I'm going to call it baggage that many people are raised with and don't even recognize that they're raised with it because it's their norm. They don't see it as this is a little bit odd or this is a little out of the how we could really cope with life mechanisms. So the fact that you bring this down to this is a source of mindfulness, of grounding, of sharing, of connection, of communication, which are really all those fundamentals to having some whole wellness in your world. I really it's so valuable and I honor that you're really putting yourself so out in the bright spotlight to bring this awareness to people. It's really beautiful. And now I don't eat because I feel sick or
Well,
feel
thank
happy
you.
or feel sad. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of it. And I'm not a therapist, but I'm a human and I know what makes people tick. And what you said is such a huge part of it for people because a lot of us, I know very few people that at some point they haven't had an negative emotional connection to food. And, I think maybe you don't, I'm on the app Insight Timer, which is a meditation app, and I do cooking demonstrations on that. And we talk about this a lot, and it's the chat on there, but people drop in comments about how they felt about food growing up, their parents. I don't think parents deliberately are trying to screw around with their kids by any means, but it's generational, right? You were taught you don't waste food. So then you teach your kids, you eat everything on your plate. And today we talked about kids not not trying foods. Because to me, I'm always trying to draw connections between food and life. So when kids are like, I don't want to try that, I never say, yes, you have to try it. I say, can you try it? And then you can spit it out if you don't like it, because then it puts the power on them and they have control over it, which is really what it can often be about, is a power struggle will ensue if you insist upon pushing something down a kid's throat. And then if they don't like it, they can spit it out. But it's also tied to kids or people, and I use the term a picky eater. I think I used it. I was just speaking, and a couple people in the chat, said, "Well, my child has sensory issues." And I said, "That's different. I'm talking about this group, the main group of people. There are always going to be people here, whether it's sensory or whatever that looks like, who aren't going to fit into what I'm talking about." But I also think, just as people, we owe it to ourselves and to each other to help each other grow. And part of that growth, especially with young people, is teaching them, like, you're going to encounter things you don't like and you're going to need to try them, whether it's food, a person, a thing. And to me, that's just a natural connection. And I know some people were like, "Oh my gosh, get off your soapbox, girl." But it's an amazing way. And for young people and for all the rest of us, it just shows us how we can connect through food, because it does have all these analogies to our real life. And if you think about even mindful cooking and using all of your senses, that's going to help satiate something that maybe you're not getting from something. And also then the mindful eating part of it, which is a huge part of it, and just being aware and not being, using devices and chewing slowly. And these are things that you can just practice a little bit at a time and then build up, and you're doing it without even knowing it. I chew super slowly, and it's just because I've practiced over time, not rushing when I'm eating. And also because for me, as you know, my company's called Gather, and that's because we gather around a table and I want to facilitate conversations with people.
Yeah. I also think these points are just they just hit home very deeply. So I think decades ago, there was much more of the family unit. You sat down to the dinner table. There were no cell phones. There was no TV. There was barely a radio. I mean, I realize I'm aging myself, but this is the truth. And so the rate at which one would get from the dinner table or not wasn't dictated by I need to go play on my Xbox or, any of those things. Dinner time was dinner time, and that was that. It used to be a much more conversational gathering place. How was your day? What did you do in school today? What did Billy Bob say to you? Whatever the thing is. And now we see so much more of either one parent, no parent, two parent, multiple jobs. The kids aren't really home at any given time, or God forbid, they're on 16 different sports teams and everybody's in a different place at a different time. And so that community building event of sitting down at the table seems very much less available now than what it used to be. I certainly see where there's a little more fallout in terms of communication and expression and gathering. And so it's really interesting that this is now full circle, that people are returning to the awareness of, oh, imagine if I actually took time to chew my food versus guzzling it as I'm driving to my job, or, eating out of a box as I'm taking the kids to the field to play games, or whatever the thing may be. And that component of our mental well-being, our all of it, our spiritual and emotional well-being is so critical. So I love that you call it gathering. I also heard so clearly when you said there is such a huge connection, emotional connection, when people are preparing food, and it hits all of our senses. And the thing that comes right through to me is, you're freezing cold outside, you've been shoveling or doing the work outdoors, you come in and someone's made like a warm apple pie, and all of a sudden you just get that like warm fuzzy, like, oh my gosh, what are the emotions and the feelings that come up when you smell a nice warm apple pie on a cold day? I mean, it just takes you back. And so I love this combining of awarenesses and remembrances to preparing and speaking the language of love through food. It's just so beautiful that you've put the two pieces that you actually originally sort of said, no, I'm not doing that. And I love Universe for this, because they're like, no, Melanie, you're gonna be doing this. And so they graciously just dumped all the hints in front of you till you had no choice but to say, oh, I wonder if I'm supposed to put these 2 things together. Oh, look at that. So I think it's just so funny how we get to where we get to. And we think we're getting there, like, by some, like, light bulb moment, and the reality is, it's been that way all along, and you just decided to take every other detour before you finally got to destination. I just think it's great. And I was not aware that a meditation app allows you to do, like, a training presentation. So that is really interesting.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, I took a shot, right? My friend was a sound practitioner on Insight Timer and she lives near me. And I said, I use this app, but I feel like it's missing what I do. I'm bringing mindfulness to people and sort of showing them how to do that in a real way, like actual, a practical skill. And Insight Timer has never said to me one way or the other, like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this today. I had over 200 people on, and people heart you if they love it. And I had over 10,000 hearts. So I think it's truly resonating with people.
Yes.
And I think people also, no matter at the end of the day, like you said, I mean, these things have always been right in front of me. And I live in New York. And during the pandemic, I was trying to do full moon dinners and people here weren't really into it because here I feel like if people have any healing modality, it's a little bit more traditional and it's not as embraced here as it is in many places. And so I was like, well, that's not working. And I was like trying to figure out, and then I'm like, this is what I do. This is what I've always done. And I am, no matter what, a teacher at heart. So I'm just going to continue. And I know that's really what's hitting home with people because people do want a community. And to your point, it's really hard for people to have dinners. And I tell people all the time, I'm not coming from a place of judgment. I'm coming from a place of just stop and take a pause and think about, is there something you can do to get yourself where you want to be with your family? My own family is guilty of that. I have two sons, one of whom he's 27. He would eat every day with me if he lived here. Like that's his character. Our younger son is 15 and he's like, I want to go play with my friends online on the video games. And we're like, no, you need to eat with us for dinner. But it's a struggle. And I fully understand how, you know, both people have jobs, kids are in a million activities. But one of the things I really want people to hear is that the family is an activity and that I think people want their children to be involved in all these activities because they're like they need it to get into a good college. I don't believe that at all. And people can have their kids at home, not involved in a thousand things, and they're going to build a pretty amazing character and person. I'm one of the strongest, most confident people I know. I actually don't know many people that have the level of confidence that I have. And I'm pretty certain that it came from eating dinner with my grandparents and my parents every single night because we sat there and we had conversations just like we're doing. And it was just validation of you as a human, right? What did you do today? Oh, that sounds so amazing. And we don't see a lot of that happening now. And we see kids really struggling and faltering. And that whole piece about going online, they're looking for connection, but they're not getting it in real life. I honestly hated the pandemic for this very reason. I think our already society, it was in a little bit of a tailspin. It just went and got out of kilter a little bit more.
So what I see going on, especially with the kids and the devices, and I'm of the era like I didn't have a cell phone as a kid. Yeah, I mean, we had to pick up phone with the like, dial. For people who don't know that, you used to actually dial a phone number. But now everybody lives on their iPhone or their Droid or whatever they have. And it breaks my heart when I go to a restaurant or I see someone and you have 4 people at a table and everybody's on their phone. I'm like, what is the point in that? Like, I don't get it. Put the phone down, leave it in the car, leave it at home, do whatever you got to do. I think the other thing that is super valuable is the ritual that goes along with the family gathering. So I live pretty rurally. I live at the top of a mountain on a dead end road, and all of my neighbors, who are not like 2 doors down, I mean, they're down street, they're all connected. So there's 4 generations of family that all live within, I don't know, 400 yards of each other, I guess. They get together every Sunday at grandma's And that's what they do, regardless of who's doing what. You don't play in your sports on that day. You don't go to your friend's house that day. You don't, I don't, whatever it is, when I drive by at that particular time of day, there's a dozen cars in that driveway because that's what they do. And you don't see that too much anymore. But what I have to say is the younger kids, the kids who are like teenage and that third generation down now, those kids are so grounded and centered and have the capacity to hold communication with an adult, not just da 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 on the phone. I think the pandemic made it rough for a lot of kids because not only did they go into it already on their devices, which means they were totally disconnected human to human, but then it was actually, mm, it was amped up, I'm going to say, because then they were at home or Zoom learning or whatever the thing was. And so the whole this post-pandemic, like, the kids all have anxiety, the kids don't have any coping skills, the kids don't have da 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 da, whatever is going on. Well, yeah. Why? Because there's been no routine or ritual that would foster that kind of growth and confidence. So like you know, I'm a pretty confident girl. Like, I know how to get what I need to get done and do the thing, and again, I was kind of raised that way. It was in all of my surroundings, everything from square one up. You started this podcast and said I was raised on a farm. Well, you learned the value of respect for the land, respect for what you do, along with the hard work that's involved in putting food on a table, which expands your knowledge base of how to communicate and respect what's going on in your world. And I hate to admit it and say it, but I think a lot of this current generation who's had to go through things like a pandemic, they're missing out on an enormous piece that was just so norm for us. That was just like, well, this is how I am. This is my everyday life. So the need for what you provide, I think it's huge. I think it's absolutely huge. And it's great that there are so there's the dichotomy of technology, right? Like, we're bitching technology is a pain in the ass and everybody's disconnected because of technology. But let's look at the flip side. The technology is what's allowing you to get on Insight Timer and bring your word to the people who can't drive to location or, can't sit down for 3 hours for a workshop clinic or a whatever it is. And so to be able to jump on that app and see you and hear you and connect with you is huge. I mean, it's really beautiful. So
I agree. And I say that in my lives, because I don't bash technology because it has a place, right? And that's a perfect example. There's I think 27 million users on Insight Timer and around 600,000 people a day. Now, obviously, I'm not reaching that many, but I'm amazed because in what other space would I be able to meet people from literally all over the world? I have people today, Australia, Africa, Switzerland, all over Europe, all over the United States. And that's amazing. And there is, believe it or not, this is what's interesting. I really believe it's a phenomenal app because you build a community. I am building a community on there, which is really interesting to me because we can see each other. On Insight Timer, I can't see anyone. They can type
oh,
in the chat, and it's very limited in terms of sort of what we're doing because it's only one way. But you can feel the energy in the live from all the people that are there and writing in the chat, and people know each other because it's this really interesting thing. And that just tells me also that people want community. When I was 18, I said, I want to live in a commune. And I've always said, I want to build a commune for when I retire because I know me, I need that. And I think that we all really need that. And we need to know that we have people that have our back. And I'm hoping that's my sort of goal with all of this is that, like I said, taking an activity that people have to do. Everybody eats, and we eat more than once a day. And not everybody cooks, but usually people are cooking. So taking that activity and trying to bring a little bit more joy and fun and playfulness, and like you said, the curiosity and the creativity to it. Because if you're doing something every day, you want to love it a little bit and then also use it as a way to bring people together.
you want to love it a little bit. You crack me up. You want to love it a lot a bit. If you're doing something at least 8 hours a day, you better damn sure love it a lot a bit. Oh my
Well,
goodness.
think about though, even if you're just making your own food for yourself, it's not going to be 8 hours. And for people who hate it, that's a step. Liking it a little bit,
Yeah.
just bringing them
Yeah.
from here to here is sometimes huge for people because they can't. And also, I was lucky. I had my mother telling me, do what you love. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about anything because when you're doing what you love, my mom said it all falls into place. And that's not something that a lot of people are told.
That is the truth. Your mama's a smart, smart woman. So I was not told do what you love. I was told so my parents were post-war, and so they came from a lot of deprivation difficulty, and so, of course, like every generation, they want better for the next, right? We want you to have what we didn't have, and basically their expectation for us was in order for you to be somebody, be successful, be happy in their way, you had to whatever, go to college, have a career, do a thing. And don't get me wrong, I do enjoy what I do, but there's so much more. There's just so much more than what do you do, 8 to 5. And so if you're going to do that, I think your mom is so wise. Do the thing that you love the most, and everything else will fall into place. And I think that's so absolutely the truth. So, so, so true. So your mama, she's a bright girl, smart girl.
Well, if she were alive, she would be 93
Yeah.
and she died 20 years ago. She was born in 1932 and my dad was born in 1941 and he was 10 years younger than my mom, which was unheard of when they got married. And women, she was an engineer and women didn't do that. So I think she was always definitely a barrier and rule breaker and just paving her own way. And they had a very non-traditional marriage. And the fact that my dad was 10 years younger, I'm sure he made less money than my mom because he owned his own business. And neither one of them cared because those things didn't really matter.
And look what has occurred for you. You're the entrepreneur. You've built your own way. You're successful in what you do. You're doing something you love. I mean, you're like the perfect epitome of if somebody wants to get out there and do the thing, what would you advise them? What would be your three top tips? And here you are. So I would love for you to share. If you had to tell somebody one thing that you would say, here's my 2 cents for you, what would that be?
I mean, it sounds cliche, but it would be, follow your heart slash intuition and don't worry about what other people think. Everyone's always going to have an opinion. Everybody wants to put in their 2 cents. And I talk about this in cooking with food. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It only matters what you think. It only matters what you're doing because at the end of the day, you're the person that's responsible for you. And you've got to, if you know that you're doing what you love, the rest will follow, Mom.
Thank you, Mom.
And it's so true.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Mom.
Thank you, Mom. Yeah, it's such good advice. And oh gosh, the other question that I don't know if it's a question, but you said earlier on, you said what I really enjoy seeing is that when somebody learns that they're able to prepare their own food, it gives them a sense of power for over themselves, sovereignty over what they do, who they are. And to me, that is such an enormous piece. And here's why I say so a lot of times, I'm sure you have run into folks like this where the kitchen is like the sacred zone of whatever that only so and so can be in the kitchen and they prepare the food or they don't let the kid make the PBJ sandwich or whatever the thing is because it either is going to make a mess or it isn't done right or whatever. So I think in the act of I'm nurturing and I'm caring for you by preparing this lunch for you, in a way, it's a little bit like saying, I don't think that you are okay yourself to do this. I don't think you're strong enough in your being or you've got confidence enough within yourself that you're capable of making your peanut butter and jelly. So I'm going to do this for you. And in the act of love of let me make your PBJ for you, I think there is a piece of that. Granted, I realize when you're 2, maybe you need that done, but we're talking a little bit older. I think there's a piece of that that is an unspoken, unrecognized Mm, almost taking away of someone's sovereignty in a subtle way. Like it's not an intentional meanness, it's just very subtle. But then that gets built upon over years and years and years until you have an adult who really feels like, hey, I can't really own who I am and what I do because, I can remember as a kid, my mom wouldn't even let me make a PBJ, that kind of thing. And so I think what you teach by teaching people how to take care of themselves through understanding what they can do with food for themselves is the gift of sovereignty.
Yes, and I actually feel like you must have been eavesdropping on so many classes because that's probably one of the top things that people say to me is my whomever said I can't come in the kitchen and I'm not allowed in there. I'll make a mess. And I have a friend who years ago her daughter started to walk into the kitchen and she went and I said, "What's going on?" And she goes, "Oh, she's not allowed in the kitchen. She's going to make a mess." And I said, "Well, thank you, because she's a future client." And I said, "But also messes can be cleaned." There's that's we are doing a disservice, and I think obviously it depends on where your intention is coming from. Am I trying to keep my kitchen pristine, or am I giving an act of love? Because that's the other thing is that, and joy comes from taking care of people and being able to nurture people, and sometimes that does come from food. My husband had a kidney transplant, and people brought me food every day for 30 days. And my husband was like, "You know how to cook. Why would you do that?" Somebody made a meal train for me. And I said, "Because somebody is taking care of me, because someone is putting love into some food here and putting in their energy and bringing it to me when I need support. And that's how they're supporting me. And I'm allowing that support because I need it right now." So that intent can be good. But on the flip side, like you said, it's not sometimes giving people ownership and then they don't know how to do whatever, peanut butter and jelly or anything else, and they're not sure how to take care of themselves because they weren't allowed those opportunities. And if you think about cooking, it's building so many life skills. Critical thinking and problem solving are two of the biggest things, because if something is always going to sort of go amiss, you've got to figure yourself out, and how do I fix it, what do I do from here? And I always tell parents this, that if you're giving your children opportunities to make mistakes in a safe environment like cooking, they're going to feel safe enough to make it when it matters, whether that's on a test, in sports, or something significant. You know, 9/11, my friend was in the World Trade Center and they told them not to leave, and they left. And they lived because they left because they said, "I'm not going to do what someone told me just because." And I think that's a really important lesson to teach kids. And so I do this thing. I also teach in a high school where I teach a culinary arts program and we run a restaurant. And I ask kids, what do you think makes a great student? What do you think makes a great teacher? And then where is the overlap? And the one thing I've noticed the past few years with students is they say a great student is a student that listens. So I ask them, what does that mean to you? Because listening takes on all sorts of meanings. And a lot of them mean a student who doesn't push back, or maybe a student who doesn't have curiosity and they're just listening. And I tell them, like, I want kids who push back. I want kids who ask questions, because this now in your time when you're, 15 to 18 is when you should be pushing back and asking questions. So that's in a cooking class, but those skills extend everywhere. And I think that's why it's so important that we let it come to cooking, because then it does build that safety net for kids to feel comfortable to do it anywhere in their lives.
It's great. It's really great. I mean, you're absolutely spot on. These are such huge life lessons. And they're also lessons that are teaching our younger folks to, you can call it pushback. I like to call it be curious and question, but not from a defensive perspective. And so I think what's also difficult is you're told in one portion of your teenage years, like, be respectful and don't say boo to your elders. And if someone tells you to do something, zip it and do it. And all those program beliefs and thoughts that we're told when you're in school, be a good student and don't contradict the teacher, da 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 da. And the flip side is, in order to really learn life skills, you actually have to be a little contradictory. You have to be a little challenging. You have to be willing to be a little edgy, not rude, not disrespectful, but edgy. Like, seek what is just on the boundary of where you are, because it's called a precipice for a reason. That is the edge of where the learning goes and where the growth happens. And so to offer it through in a venue of the food preparation, creation, all of the learning involved in what you share, it's like the safe space to learn life skills because it isn't going to be, someone's going to keel over kind of thing. It's a safe space to learn what needs to be learned. And I think, gosh, that we just need so much more of that. We really do. We really just need so much more of that. So I love and I so value and appreciate that you're sharing this on this particular podcast. I'm sure you caught the trailer, but I'm really fascinated and interested in how can we help our fellow humans on earth of all ages to break through a lot of this programming that we are inadvertently it's life. I mean, it's lifing. It is what it is. This is life. This is what happens. There's no magic. There's no bubble wrap. There's no guarantee that you're coming through without some wounds and you're not getting out of this one unscathed. End of story. But to have people who can be both the student and the teacher, because truthfully, that's all we are. All of us, we're both the student and the teacher at different points of our lives, available to help our next person unbecome what they have become because of all of the stuff is really beautiful. It's in the language of coming through food and food preparation to really tie it all together is it's unique. It's so needed, so needed and so valued. And it's just exciting. When I think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, the possibilities here are just unbelievable. It's just so phenomenal. I love it.
It really is. I
I
mean,
love it.
when you're speaking about being the student and the teacher, I tell students all the time when they're like, no, I don't have anything to learn. I'm like, well, I have stuff to learn. And I've been doing this literally my entire lifetime. So if I can learn, you can learn. And once in a while, I'll have a parent call and say, oh, I'm worried my kid is going to be bored in your cooking class, through my business. And I'm just like, that says a lot. You're worried about your 10-year-old being bored in a cooking class because I'm like, that's where we're not developing someone's curiosity. And my own kids, sometimes will say, does everything need to be a lesson? And for students who've had me for a long time, they kind of say, like, oh my God, here we go. Everything's a lesson. But I'm like, everything is a lesson. You can always have a glimmer of learning in every moment of everything that happens to you. And that just sort of opens us up to keep our minds more receptive to learning and growing. To your point about just breaking free of sort of the programming that we're taught.
Absolutely. So I think what you offer is just the ultimate in the expression of what I like to call the universal law of reciprocity. It's giving and receiving. It's like the ultimate, you're giving of yourself and what is being received both back to you and to your students. It's just the ultimate in receivership, which is it's just really beautiful to see. It really is. You're totally
Yeah,
a
thank
gift and a joy. Tell us how
you.
people can find you for more, for everything.
Yes. Well, you can go to my website, which is gatherculinary.com. And from there, you can find me on Insight Timer, but you can also go directly to the app Insight Timer, which is, it's even if you don't like cooking, there are, I don't know how many teachers, but a lot of teachers that cover everything in the universe related to mindfulness and meditation and tarot. It's all there and it's fun. But you can go to my website. You can always connect with me through there. And then I actually just launched another company called the Mindful Table, which I'm super excited about. And that's about conversation pieces around the dinner table. So
Wow.
the one
We're
I
going to
just
be
launched
doing
is now,
another episode to talk about that because that saying of, oh, I'd like to be a fly in the wall. Wow. I bet you
yes,
there are some really fascinating dinner conversations that go on. Yeah.
yes. I did some trial runs with these. The ones that I'm releasing are napkins that have questions. And some people I knew and some people I didn't, and everyone was shocked about how much people opened up and what they learned about other people that they thought they already knew. And that's the other piece. Sometimes we think we really know people and we don't because we're not asking the questions.
I think that's
So,
true. I think that's so true.
yeah,
Well, this is so fabulous. I'm so excited for you. So good. So
thank
good.
you.
Sounds fabulous. I'm going to put it all in the show notes. And I myself am going to go check you out more on Insight Timer. I sort of scroll through, but oh gosh, it sounds so great. I really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon. And the next time you're up my way, I don't care if it's a full moon or not, we could totally do a retreat. It would be so much fun up here. It would be a
Oh,
blast.
yeah, definitely.
That would
That
be
would be
great.
fun. Thank you so much for having
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And we're going to do another episode once we get your next business up and running. It's going to be great.
me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.